My next guests are going to engage in a debate. I'm very proud to announce that we're going to have a debate here on I Object, Justice Examined between two eminent scholars on the subject of the minimum wage. And to the right, we are going to have Dr. Walter Block, who earned his Ph.D. in economics at Columbia University. He is a very prolific author and editor and co-editor of many books. He's written many journal articles. Some of his books include Defending the Undefendable, Lexicon of Economic Thought, Man, Economy, and Liberty, Essays in Honor of Murray N. Rothbard. Plus, he's contributed to journals such as the Review of Austrian Economics, Journal of Libertarian Studies, and the Journal of Labor Economics. He is currently a professor and chair of economics at the College of Business Administration at Loyola University. And to the left, we have Dr. Jared Bernstein, who joined the Economic Policy Institute in 1992, and he has a new book out called Crunch, Why Do I Feel So Squeezed, and Other Unsolved Economic Mysteries, which follows a book that he wrote earlier, All Together Now, Common Sense for a Fair Economy. And he researches in the area of income inequality and mobility and trends in employment and earnings, low-wage labor markets and poverty, and other areas. He's also the co-author of 8 editions of the book, The State of Working America. He holds a Ph.D. in social welfare from Columbia University. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here with you, Jerry.
That's great. Well, I think to start out this debate, probably what we ought to do is have Dr. Bernstein, since he advocates the minimum wage and also an increase in the minimum wage. Dr. Bernstein, why don't you spend about 3 minutes making your case about why the minimum wage is a good thing and why it should be raised?
Sure. The minimum wage is an important floor, if you will, on the labor market. There are a great deal of pressures on low-wage workers in our economy, and since the 1930s, when minimum wages were first introduced, we've recognized that if left to their own devices, market forces will push the wages of low-wage workers down to privation levels that are unacceptable to Congress and to society. And it's not just market forces. There's discrimination in play. There's a lack of bargaining power. Sometimes our lowest wage, least advantaged workers are heavily exploited and paid a lot less what they ought to be. The economics theory or textbook analysis of minimum wage is quite clear. It suggests that if you raise a minimum wage or impose a mandate that's 1 penny above what the supposedly market wage would dictate, all these workers would lose their jobs. And when I was in grad school learning these theories, I learned that the minimum wage was a terrible idea for that very reason. But then I learned that you can't trust the theory. You actually have to go into the data and see how these wage changes play out in the real world. And I'm sure Walter and I will have a lot of arguments about what those data show. But I feel very, very strongly, and I want our listeners to recognize that theory alone cannot answer this question. You have to get down to cases, because the cases have shown time and again, highest quality research we have, I think, in economics, have shown that moderate increases in the minimum wage absolutely do not have that old textbook effect. They have the desired effect of helping to offset the very problems I've mentioned. The research has been so convincing that the new textbooks are saying different things than the old textbooks.
Well, thank you, Dr. Bernstein. And Dr. Block, do you want to respond to that? And also, if you will, include what other factors you think might be forcing or might be causing income inequalities?
Well, in my view, Jared Bernstein correctly articulates the view that it's a floor under wages. That is the argument in favor of minimum wages. I think most people see it as a floor. You raise the floor, and you raise everyone's wages to whatever the minimum wage level is. I don't see it that way at all. I see it rather as a hurdle over which you have to jump in order to get a job, because the minimum wage law isn't an employment law, it's an unemployment law. It says it shall be illegal to pay anyone less than whatever the minimum wage level is, say $5.15 or $6 an hour, whatever it is. doesn't say that anyone has to be hired. It just says you can't pay less than whatever the stipulated wage is. But we have to dig a little deeper, and we have to ask, why is it that employers want to pay wages to employees in the first place? And the answer is productivity in general, or marginal revenue productivity if you want to be technical. Namely, the employer is paying the worker because of what he can add to his bottom line. So, suppose you have a teenage worker whose productivity is, $3 an hour. That means that if you hire him, your bottom line is $3 an hour better than it would be if you didn't hire him. Well, now, if the law says that you have to hire him at $5 or not at all, it's pretty clear that you won't hire him at all. Because if you do, you lose $2 an hour on him, and we're assuming profit maximizing or profit-seeking behavior. And if you do that, then why would the employer want to hire the employee at all? So that's why I say it's not a floor. It doesn't raise anyone's wages. Rather, it makes it very difficult for people whose productivity is below the level stipulated by the minimum wage law to get a job at all. Because if you hire someone whose productivity is $3 an hour and you have to pay him $5, you lose $2 an hour. Now, it's not for nothing that we have special exemptions from the minimum wage law. For example, for teenagers, we have a special lower minimum wage law for teenagers. We have a special lower minimum wage law for mentally handicapped workers, not physically handicapped workers, because physically handicapped workers have very high productivities. For example, we could have this debate between Professor Bernstein and myself if we were both in wheelchairs. But if you're mentally handicapped, then your wages, your productivity is way lower. So if minimum wage law is really a floor, why have exemptions? I mean, that's very non-charitable, very callous. And also, if it's such a great idea, why be so niggardly about that? And I hope and trust no one thinks I'm using the N-word here. Why be so niggardly? Why raise it, $5, $6, $7 an hour? Why not raise it, $100, $1,000, $1 million an hour? And then in one fell swoop, with the passage of a legislative pen, we could, solve poverty. We'd all be rich. Now, Dr. Bernstein says it's not just a matter.
Can we stick to our 3-minute rule here?
Why don't we let Dr. Bernstein? We have a little less than 2 minutes left on this. I noticed on your website, or that the Economic Policy Institute, that you guys dispute that this causes unemployment. Do you want to discuss that a little bit?
I don't want to cut Walter off. I just want to. Do you really want to say 3 minutes each, or not?
Well, why don't you go ahead and respond at this point? We only have about a minute and a half left on this particular segment.
Okay, is that all right with you, Walter?
I don't mind. I don't mind when you interrupt me. If I had the incorrect view, I'd probably be interrupting you.
Oh, now, Walter, that sounds a little rude. Be nice.
Well, you were the one that interrupted me.
No, I'm just saying that I thought the understanding was we each got 3 minutes. You had gone on for longer than that.
Right, but right now you're wasting time, so why don't you respond?
No, I don't want to. Go ahead, Walter, finish. I don't want to interrupt. I just was trying to get the rules straight. Please, finish, Walter.
Well, I think what Dr. Bernstein said was that it's a matter of both theory and data and cases, and I'd like to discuss that, but I think the music is sort of cutting me off. Is that right, Jerry?
Well, we got 30 seconds, and
okay, well, if you people who are listening out there in Radio Land, if you put a supply and demand curve on a piece of paper, the equilibrium wage is where supply and demand crosses, and a minimum wage above that level will absolutely, definitively, apodictically cause unemployment of people below that level.
Dr. Bernstein, why don't you reply to the assertion by Dr. Block that the minimum wage is an unemployment law as opposed to an employment law?
Well, I think what Walter was espousing there was very much the theoretical view that I mentioned in my opening statement, and I totally agree that is what theory used